Malta. Deep beneath this small town in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea rests one of the oldest subterranean structures in the world.
On the islands of Malta, there are prehistoric remains that are comprised of megalithic underground sites, which were considered to be communal burial sites. The most famous of these is the Halsafleni Hypogeum. Halsafleni dates back to about 6,000 years ago.
It's multi-layered, 3 major levels, and it's really just astounding to have carved it into the limestone. I'm a geologist. I know how difficult it is to engineer something like that and carry it out. To me, it shows incredible sophistication on a technological basis. I can't claim that I know exactly how they did it.
When the Halsaflieni Hypogeum was first discovered in 1902, archaeologists were astounded to find buried within it more than 7,000 skeletons. In May 1920, a National Geographic article reported that many of the remains were those of humans that were long-skulled. But during World War II, the site was plundered by vandals, and the skeletons mysteriously disappeared. Luckily, 11 of the elongated skulls were salvaged, and at least one of these displays a non-human feature. It is missing the sagittal suture that connects the parietal bones on all human skulls.
A bizarre report came from a woman named Lois Jessup, who had worked for the British consulate in Malta. She had been visiting the Hypogeum and had convinced one of the caretakers to let her go into the lowest chamber. She claimed that she came out into a ledge in a great fissure that was beneath Malta. And on a ledge on the other side of the fissure, she claimed she saw very tall men.
According to her account, she saw about 20 white-haired giants that looked up at her and motioned her to come down. One has to wonder if the Hypogeum has some sort of an extraterrestrial presence.
As incredible as Lois Jessup's story may be, perhaps the most extraordinary discovery at the Hypogeum has to do with sound. In February of 2014, Archaeoacoustics researcher Linda Enix gathered an assemblage of audio, geology, and archaeology experts to test the acoustic properties of the most mysterious chamber in the site, known as the Oracle Room. After extensive testing, Linda and her team reached an incredible conclusion. The entire Hypogeum resonates at the specific frequency of 110 Hertz.
You physically feel the vibration of that sound in your whole body. It was mesmerizing.
Sound is created by the vibration of an object, which causes the air surrounding it to vibrate and form a wave.
Depending on the frequency it oscillates with, that will determine the note or the tone you hear. Hertz is the unit we use to measure frequency. It's basically the number of oscillations per second. Resonance is basically whenever something is vibrating, that frequency matches the natural frequency or vibration of the object. This is really important with sound applications. If you take an enclosed space, the way you get a resonance is to make the size of the room or space match the frequencies and wavelength of the sound you're trying to achieve, so that when it hits the ends of the walls, it reflects just right. These reflections build up the sound or magnitude of that vibration.
What is going on here, and why are they specifically using that frequency? So you have to wonder whether extraterrestrials weren't involved in tuning the Hypogeum to create this special frequency.
And what I have always found fascinating is that we have stories of these magical incantations.
Right.
But you know, operating something with voice commands, if you don't know what that is, that's a magical incantation.
This is the interesting thing, because when you look at the Ark of the Covenant, you look at the high priest. The high priest, of course, would speak to God, wearing the breastplate of judgment, which had the 12 stones on it. The high priest would approach the Ark of the Covenant, and he would start to recite certain tones, sounds. These were very deep, tonal, throat-type chants. The tones were said to then cause the stones to vibrate, and they would send out lights, and then the Ark somehow would react to this. There's some active energy there, which we call the glory or kavod of God. It's not God, but it's some actual energy field that if you would be in the presence, remember, you couldn't go into
Or a
the
machine.
presence.
That's right.
Something was there that if you went too close, you died.
I'll tell you exactly what that sounds to me like. This breastplate has optical and or acousto-optical transceivers on it.
Yep.
And they are handshaking, which is what the old school acoustic phone modems would do when you would call up or the fax machine calls up to connect to the other side.
What we're seeing here is that they would use sound to link heaven and earth.
The idea that sound can facilitate communication between man and divine beings, like the Hindu use of Om, is a common theme in religious traditions throughout the world.
All religions really use music, and you see that in worship services. So the cantor with the psalms in the Jewish traditions, choir in Christian traditions, even in the Islamic tradition where there's no formal music, there's a melody to the recitation of the Quran. Every culture has the idea that this music connects us with the divine.
For many religious practices, just as important as musical traditions are the locations in which the rituals are performed.
A choir singing in Chartres Cathedral is magical because of the architectural space. And so these architectural spaces in all these various cultures, from these kind of secret monasteries in the Far East and in the Middle East, were famous for having architectural designed spaces that call up the sacred.
Interestingly, a growing number of archaeologists believe some of the world's oldest structures were specifically designed to accentuate acoustic properties.
Like all of you, I'm always keeping up on the latest archaeological developments and research, and I think it's really fascinating that monuments worldwide have acoustic properties.
What they're finding is that these were chambers that were designed where you would have this acoustic experience that you heard, but you also felt it in your bones, in your tissue.
Yeah, they call this archaeoacoustics.
Archaeoacoustics is an interdisciplinary field of archaeology dedicated to examining how sound and acoustics were utilized in the ancient world.
It's a relatively new field, and archaeoacoustics is looking at the sound quality of ancient sites, historical sites, archaeological sites, where we see music probably played a role. Stonehenge is one of those. Where you stand in the middle of Stonehenge, you would create the sound blast of music, whatever implements were used, because we're not really sure. And it would bounce off those stones and create this sort of echo chamber.
Stonehenge functioned as a sonic temple. By this, what I mean is that individuals in the center of the monument would create musical sounds, particularly of a low frequency, that would be contained actually inside the stones and build up an energy, if you like,
for a purpose which we can only guess at right now.
All around the world, archaeologists have identified numerous ancient sites that were designed according to acoustic principles, such as Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the Hypogeum in Malta, and the Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland.
Newgrange has very strong acoustic properties. What they found is that the way the sound waves bounce around the chamber, they create what's called standing waves, and they increase in intensity and sound.
According to some researchers, curious carvings found inside Newgrange provide key evidence documenting that the structure was purposely designed to have elaborate acoustic properties.
And it seems that these were standing waves recorded actually within the chamber itself, where you can see these zigzags carved all over the place, suggesting that they not only understood acoustics, but they were recording the experience within the chambers. The other thing of real interest is the fact that when they investigated the corbelled roof, which is like multiple mega-sized stones, almost going around a spiral, they found that these had been adjusted, and they found the reason for that was because they were tuning the chamber acoustically.
Samos, Greece, 535 BC. 35-year-old mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras leaves his home to travel to Egypt and study the esoteric arts. He becomes initiated into the Egyptian priesthood and eventually founds a school where his pupils are sworn to secrecy. Despite his mysterious nature, Pythagoras would share with the world groundbreaking mathematical concepts, and he believed that through his study of both music and the movement of the planets, he had uncovered the sacred code of the universe.
The ancients realized that they were wandering objects called planets. And because they moved, perhaps encoded in the motion of these planets was our destiny, the future. That there was a rhyme and reason to the radii of the orbits of the planets. The music of the spheres. That these spheres, when they rotate, create music according to certain ratios found in music. The person who first understood the laws of music was Pythagoras. He worked out the laws of music, that music is divided into 12 notes.
Pythagoras had this notion that the music of the spheres, that the harmony, the sound that moved the planets around was also the sound that would keep the body in alignment. So above as below, that we would be in sync with the movements of our own galaxy because of this musical pattern that suffused everything. There are 12 tones in the musical system, so there's a 12ness to the way the galaxies are harmonized, to the way our bodies might be in sync with everything, all through the 12 tones of a musical scale.
An octave has 12 steps to it, and that became the origin of the mathematics of music. Well, today we believe that string theory, which is what I do for a living, is based on the harmonies of vibrating strings. We now believe that all the subatomic particles in the universe, neutrons, protons, quarks, are nothing but different vibrations of a tiny rubber band. And so what is the universe? The universe is a symphony of strings. And therefore, what is the mind of God that Albert Einstein wrote about so eloquently for the last 30 years of his life? According to string theory, the mind of God would be cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. That is the mind of God.
Is humanity's modern understanding of the physics of the universe just now allowing us to comprehend the esoteric knowledge of our ancestors? Knowledge that was perhaps given to them by extraterrestrials for future generations to rediscover.
So if the number 12 is sacred to the physical world, we should question why. And in modern science, we're beginning to have an answer and to ultimately receive the revelation of the wisdom of God, symbolized by the number 12. So the number 12 is out there, but it could only be comprehended when the mind contemplates the reality of the physical world. And then by doing that, through the power of perception, the power of perception influences space and time, and therefore changes the whole physical world as we know it.
Ancient religious leaders, commonly known as shaman, were seen as links between humans and a higher realm. For the shaman, sound was not used merely to make a spiritual connection with the divine, but to actually interact with otherworldly beings.
The term shaman comes from Siberian religious practices, and it means somebody who can see the underlying fabric of the world around them. These are the negotiators between this world and the other world. They could step into the other world to negotiate with otherworldly forces.
Individuals, shamans, when they chanted, when they sung, when they used the instruments, it was to enter into altered states of consciousness so that they could communicate with spirit entities and perhaps connect with what we might describe as ancient aliens.
The point is that the shamanistic practices all built upon what? Chants, sounds, altered states of consciousness, which bring you into connection with extraterrestrials, aliens, whatever is out there.
That's a really interesting point, Rabbi. You know, we have discovered that sound waves can actually control our brain.
In the 1960s, neuroscientists discovered that rhythm and acoustics can produce a physiological change in the human brain through a process known as entrainment.
If I can create a pulsing in the external environment that's pulsing at a brainwave speed, my brainwaves will try to match that speed to save energy, and my consciousness will change in the process. So we can do that using just a drum to change consciousness at will. If I hook you up to an EEG machine so I can look at your brainwaves, and normally when we're awake, my brainwaves are generating beta function, which is rapid, between 13 Hertz and 38. And the drum beat is at 5. And my brainwaves are going to start slowing down and slowing down, slower, slower, to take my consciousness from a waking state into a dream state without going to sleep first, which means that's a classic definition of a trance. The earliest examples of brain entrainment would be shamanic drumming. The speed of the drum beat tends to be around 5 Hertz, and that's about like this. That's about it. That's about 5 Hertz. And 5 Hertz is where your brain goes when you're dreaming at night. The whole idea is to transform consciousness.
They were trying to achieve a connection with the divine, with the otherworldly.
If modern science has proven that shamanic drumming does, in fact, induce a state of trance, could it also be true that it enables extrasensory abilities and even allows for communication with other realms? While it may sound like a far-fetched notion, in 1995, the U.S. government revealed that brain entrainment was part of its top-secret spy program called Project Stargate. Operatives in this clandestine unit gathered intelligence about persons, places, and events from great distances by sensing with their minds, a practice called remote viewing. During the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter's administration used remote viewers to locate a downed Russian spy plane in Africa.
You talk to any of the old remote viewers, the ones from the Stargate program, they'll tell you how accurate and how important and how relevant their information was.
John Vivanco has been working in the field of remote viewing as both a teacher and practitioner for more than 20 years.
I worked with corporations, intelligence, counterterror for the FBI after 9/11.
At the start of every remote viewing session, John uses specific sounds to entrain his brainwaves and create a trance-like state.
What we do with remote viewing before we do a session is a cool down. We will meditate, and one of the aids that we'll use are binaural beats. So if you think about frequencies in the ear, we'll listen to these sounds. So if one ear is pulsing a sound of, let's just say, 6 Hertz, and in another ear it's pulsing a sound of 4 Hertz, your brain waves will synchronize to around 5 Hertz. And we like to stay in that zone in order to get the best information.
John claims that by entering this trance state, remote viewers have gathered more than just information. They have also encountered otherworldly beings.
We were working a project around the Arecibo Radio Observatory, and I was the first viewer on this particular tasking. And I start to get these beings, these aliens. I just remember during the session, I kept saying, they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. And they started to take notice of me. And I'm starting to freak out because I've got tons of adrenaline flowing through me. I'm in fight or flight. It telepathically communicated with me, and it said, we are here to help you, and we want you to help us. The other viewers started to experience the same thing. And so that's when we started to, okay, now, I'm not hallucinating. This is absolutely real.